I am back, and sorry about that a little bit before, but we're diving right into Mayor Kenney talking about the Affordable Care Act. Essentially, he said that the Affordable Care Act repeal will probably leave around 200,000 Philadelphians uninsured. As of right now, we have Jay McCalla, a commentary writer for the Chestnut Hill Local and the Philadelphia Inquirier, and political commentator for 9 a.m. WURD. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing great. I'm doing
glad.
great. It's a little cold out, but we're making the adjustment.
I'm glad you came in. It's been a while since I've seen you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Jim Kenney is right about, I think he said 200,000 Philadelphians are going to lose their health care if the Affordable Care Act is repealed. And he's right. He's approximately right. Nobody knows exactly. But we also have an incoming Secretary of Education who wants to give all federal dollars to charter schools and charters only. No more money for public schools. We've got Ben Carson coming in at Housing and Urban Development, who will likely preside over cuts in assistance to cities, certainly the cities in the Northeast. So while Kenney is right about Obamacare, he's got to pull back and look at the entirety of the attack that's coming and make a plan. The city's got about 10 health centers, and we help hospitals in this area. We've got an agency that helps hospitals obtain low-interest loans when they want to build something new or do other kinds of expansion. So it seems to me we have the makings of an alternative that can help fill the gap if we really want to, if we try. Philly Pauls are way too content, I think, to point at Harrisburg or Washington and say what they are or aren't doing for us. What we've got now the rubber has met the road. We know what the future brings. And it's going to be no health care. We're going to see cuts to cities. We're going to see cuts to education. And it can't be a viable position for an urban mayor to say, they cut my budget, and then just sit there staring at people. You've got to do something as a response. And this, like our great, though I forget the name of that terrific lady who resigned last night or was fired for taking the right position as a U.S. Attorney General, this is a time when people have to stand up and do a little bit more. She was a symbol of courage equal to Bree Newsom, who climbed the flag down in the Carolinas to pull down the Confederate flag. This woman last night was a hero. And Jim Kenney has to show that he has as much courage as the U.S. Attorney General who got fired last night. He needs an alternative plan.
Well, what do you think he's even able to do right now, like as mayor, especially when in relation to health care?
More. We documented our desire to provide health care for Philadelphians by creating 10 district health centers. One's at Broad and Sansom, and there's one in every council district. So we're already in the water. We've got our toe in the water. We're already providing AIDS testing. We're already providing other kinds of testing. We're providing prescriptions for psychotropic drugs. These are mini hospitals. Now, if we're losing services from the federal government, the question becomes, how do we power up those 10 centers to provide better care for the people who need it, the people who are at risk? Which means balancing other priorities. The mayor missed an opportunity to save $100 million a year by not putting an end to DROP, the Deferred Retirement Option Plan, that cost the city $100 million more a year, and we get nothing new for it. He missed that opportunity. He just raised taxes $100 million, only a portion of which will go to pre-K, and that portion will only fund pre-K for 3 years. So could we better program the money we've got to provide health care? I think we can. I think we've got what we need to step into the breach. But that means choices. Politicians are really, really bad at making choices. They are. I wish they were better, but they are.
Just going to put it on politicians, like, make better decisions, you guys.
They are the ones that come out and say, vote for me, and I'll make your streets safer. I'll make them cleaner. The nets on the basketball courts at city rec centers, we're going to replace them. They're the ones who come out and say, if you give me $135,000 a year, a car, a 9-month-a-year work schedule, I'll work wonders for you. Kids are my priority. Safety is my priority. Poverty is my priority. They come and yell that, and they put that on our faces, and we choose. We choose which ones they're all making the same promise, so the choices are tough, but we pick. they get the job, and it's their responsibility to go where they go.
So then who would you say has been the most effective thus far defending the ACA in Philadelphia politics then? Because it seems as if you just mentioned Mayor Kenny needs to do more.
Yes.
So who is it in Philadelphia government that you think is making the proper steps of actually defending the ACA then?
The only persons who can, and I'm always uncomfortable when I put an S on person, the only persons who can would be the mayor, who has the infrastructure and the budget to create an enhanced health care provision for the people of the city. You also have our U.S. Congress people and our United States Senator who represent this area. But their voices are in the minority in the Senate and in the House. Their voices can't be effective. They can shine a light, just as Jim Kenney shined a light by saying 200,000. But we have the media to shine a light. The job of politicians is to provide the solution. And our federal representatives in Congress and the Senate, they're in the minority and their voices don't really matter. And they're yelling to a president who doesn't really care. So for the time being, you can spare the yelling. Trump doesn't care. The responsibility, I believe, nobody really is doing an adequate job. The job to be done is in the hands of the mayor and city council, people who control billions of dollars of local spending. But no, nobody's distinguishing themselves as offering a solution, though some are distinguishing themselves in the volume at which they yell. But nobody's offered a solution.
So then I'm just curious, too, as we talk about the ACA getting repealed and we talk about it, it's almost breathtaking that you see 200,000 Philadelphians that would leave uninsured. Again, being a resident of Philadelphia, I understand that there's about, 1.5 million people in the city of Philadelphia. That's a significant portion of the population of Philadelphia. And we saw during the campaign trail that President Trump, at the time nominee Trump, his health care plan wasn't exactly in tune with the rest of the Republican Party, because we've seen that I don't think the Republicans had one unifying health care resolution. They've kind of had different ideas, and I still don't think we know what President Trump's going to put in replace of the ACA. What are you thinking that he puts in its place?
I don't know. He's first got to find out his business. He's in business with the Republican Congress, and I think you were absolutely right to say they're not in sync. The Republicans' first priority and Trump's first priority is to extinguish that part of the Obama legacy that's still called Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And yeah, they're the same thing, folks. But so that's their number one priority. But they've had, Obama passed 2 years into he passed his Affordable Care 2 years into his term. So they've had 6 years to come up with a cogent plan. They don't have one. They had maybe 40 votes. The number sticks in my head of 38, but probably closer to 40 votes to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Trump has made promises that you're going to get better, you're going to get warmer, you're going to get nicer health care. The Republicans just don't have a plan. The basic core of the Republican Party, and it goes back to Roosevelt's initial support of a minimum wage for women. It goes back to Harry Truman trying to get Medicare. Republicans don't believe in government providing these kinds of services. They don't believe that government should be involved in health care or education.
But at the same time, though, Trump isn't your traditional Republican. We all know he's not a textbook conservative. He kind of ran as this outsider. Some may paint it as populism. I don't know exactly whatever you want to paint it as, but it wasn't a traditional conservative. And I remember vividly watching the one Republican debate between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. They're going back and forth about Obamacare. And I think Cruz and Trump's back and forth included so people are going to be dying in the streets, and Trump said, not under my health care plan. It seemed as if Trump's maybe different from the traditional conservatives. So I'm just curious to see when they roll out this plan, and will it be more of a conservative health care plan, or is it going to be more along the lines of where Trump ran as this somewhat populist hybrid, I guess, of not a traditional textbook Republican?
Well, it's hard to figure because you can't believe a word they say. And they say you can't believe a word we say. When they introduce the term alternative facts, they're telling you, don't believe a word we say from this point forward. During his campaign, he promised he would, he's a great negotiator. He says he'll get together with all the big pharmaceutical firms and negotiate for lower drug prices. Today, he says he won't. So what was a great plan, a populist plan during the campaign to lower the cost of health care, to help people be healthier, live longer, he backed out on today. So we don't know what he's talking about. We don't know what he really means. We don't know where he's really going. And so it's hard, since we don't know what he is, it's hard to compare him to what might be coming out of Congress. But I think they'll compromise on some kind of faux bill because the Congress has bigger goals in mind. They want to take back Medicare. They want to take back Social Security. They want to take back Medicaid. And so I think they're going to find common ground on enough of this stuff. And then whatever it looks like, they'll pronounce it a success.
Well, in your opinion, what does a conservative health care plan look like? Like, what will the replacement possibly look like, in your opinion? We don't know anything, but...
Well, they didn't want us to get into Obamacare.
True.
They didn't want us to get into any kind of expansion. So I think what they would do, if left to their own devices, is repeal health care, repeal Obamacare, and then leave it. Except for the fact that 20 million Americans have it, and there may be political blowback. If they could isolate through data and be sure that only Democrats who voted for Hillary would have their health care discontinued, they would go ahead and just shut it down. This is a very, very, very partisan team that's occupying the White House. And I think just as the CHIP program, which was a health program for children to insure children, it was passed under George Bush. He vetoed it. And he says it sounded like socialized medicine. So in my view, if the Republicans are unwilling, and a reasonably moderate guy like Bush, if he's unwilling to insure children, then I don't think there is such a thing as an acceptable conservative health plan.
Because we've seen since they mentioned that they want to repeal the ACA, we've actually seen a couple senators step up and propose some ideas, it appears, again, to what they think an alternative may be in their eyes. We saw Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who's a Republican, with Senator Shelley Moore Caputo of West Virginia, and I think the senator from Georgia, Johnny Isaacson. They mentioned that they want something where, again, states could, quote, opt to stay in Obamacare, or they can opt for no federal help. And it's interesting because we've actually seen certain conservative, or at least Republican governors mention they want to kind of keep it. John Kasich's one of them, who's been more like, wait a second, let's not just repeal this thing without a replacement. So the question being then, we know they want to get this thing out of here ASAP. That's clear.
Yeah.
The question is the timing. How long? Because we talked about, I think the Democrats are using the slogan, if you break it, you buy it. You know, if you break it, you own it. If you're getting rid of the ACA, you better have something to replace it with quickly. So my question to you is then, what's the timetable? Because there's going to be a lot of people out there wondering, if they just sweep the rug under them, what's the timetable? Because people are going to be wondering and waiting.
I think Republicans have to be giving a lot of thought today on new ideas because of this immigration screw up. If you don't have a good, solid idea that's well vetted through all of interested parties inside government before you go out and interface with the public, you're really shooting yourself in both feet, your throat, and both hands. And that's what we've seen. I think it's kind of funny because the issue of competence came up when the website for Obamacare rolled out, and the website stunk. Now we see the same, maybe even worse snafu because people are being held overseas, et cetera. But just don't see an immediate future for just shutting it down. They'll lose votes. They'll scare people if they don't seamlessly come out with something else. And so that means they've got two things. They know their voters want Obamacare dead because they want the name Obama dead, but they don't have a replacement yet.
Although the Affordable Care Act, again, is basically what Bob Dole's health care plan was in 96.
Oh, yeah, it's not a radical idea.
I mean, this was originally proposed as a Republican. We saw Mitt Romney caught quite some flack at the GOP primaries in 2012 when they dubbed it Romneycare for his state. So, I mean, this isn't totally foreign to the Republican Party, but you think it's just because the name Obama's on it, therefore anything associated with that name they want to get rid of.
Well, it's two things, the name Obama and the fact that Republicans don't believe that Republicans need to be in the business of providing health care. So you got a double whammy there. But they've got to come up with something to replace it with. But you're talking about a party coming up with a health plan that really doesn't like providing health care. And yet, just like with the other imperatives that Trump has blurted out, the immigration ban and all the other stuff, his people want this. So there's going to be a tension in the near term about keeping their voters, their constituents, patient waiting for the repeal and the replacement. That's their tension, keeping the people with the pitchforks patient while they come up with a new plan.